All right, you're live and ready to begin your meeting.
Thank you. I will call to order the Planning Commission meeting for the City of Sierra Madre of Thursday, April 1st, 2021.
Chair Dennison,
Here.
Vice Chair Pevsner, Commissioners Dallas, Hutt,
Here.
and Spears. And I see Commissioner Dallas just joined us.
There.
Perfect. Next up is the approval of the agenda. I'll look for a motion.
Also move. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have the approval of the minutes of March 18th, 2021. Are there any changes that anybody would like to suggest? Hearing none, I will look for a motion to approve them as submitted.
Also move. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I abstain. Not there. Motion carries 3 ayes and 1 abstention.
Now, who abstained?
I did.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the council liaison report. I believe that our council member was not able to join us today. So as I do not see him on the list of attendees, we'll go ahead and move to community input. If you can share the slide. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience on the city website. State legislation, Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the Commission's ability to take action on specific requests. Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the placement of items on the agenda for action 72 hours prior to meetings, except for specific findings. No action or discussion may be undertaken by the Planning Commission on any item if not posted on the agenda, except that commissioners or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public, or a commissioner or a staff liaison may ask a question for clarification or make a brief report on his or her own activities. A commissioner or the commission itself may provide a reference to staff to report back to the commission at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or may direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Are there any callers at this time?
So far, you do not have any callers calling in yet.
All right. We will give the public just another minute or two to see if they would like to comment. I will note that Vice Chair Pevsner said that this was the hardest part of running these meetings, trying to kill time while waiting for public comment. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience on the city's website. State legislation, Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the commission's ability to take action on specific requests. Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the placement of items on the agenda for action 72 hours prior to meetings, except for specific findings. No action or discussion may be undertaken by the Planning Commission on any item if not posted on the agenda, except that commissioners or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public, or a commissioner or staff liaison may ask a question for clarification or make a brief report on his or her own activities. A commissioner or the commission itself may provide a reference to staff to report back to the commission at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or may direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Do we have any callers at this time?
We do not have any callers at this time.
All right, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and move on to the public hearing section. Resolution number 21-05, recommending amendments to Chapter 17, zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to state housing law. Does the city attorney have a presentation for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair Dennison. Let me share my screen. One moment. Okay. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. So as mentioned, today we're going to cover amendments to Title 17, our zoning law, and these amendments are being made pursuant to state law. So the first one is going to cover family daycare homes. A family daycare home is a licensed facility that regularly provides care, protection, and supervision for 14 or fewer children for periods of less than 24 hours per day while the parents or guardians are away. A family daycare home includes a detached single-family dwelling, a townhouse, a dwelling unit within a dwelling unit, or a dwelling within a covered multifamily dwelling in which the underlying zoning allows for residential use. A family daycare home is where the licensee resides and includes a dwelling or dwelling unit that is rented, leased, or owned. Family daycare homes are comprised of family daycare homes, small family daycare homes, and large family daycare homes. So there are two types. Under our municipal code, a small family daycare home is a permitted use in most residential zones. But under our municipal code, large family daycare homes require a conditional use permit in most residential zones. State law says that small and large family daycare homes must be a use by right in all residential zones and must be subject to the same requirements as other residential uses. So we can't target family daycare homes for regulation. To the extent they're going to be regulated, they have to be regulated like all other residential uses. So they would go through the design review permit process like other homes. And if we're going to regulate them, we could do that in the conditions of approval to the design review permit, but we couldn't adopt an ordinance today specifically targeting family daycare homes. Next, we're going to cover modular and manufactured homes. So a modular home means factory constructed, single family, one-story detached dwellings, certified under the National Manufactured Housing Construction and Safety Standards Act of 1974, that's a federal law, with approved stickers attached and placed on full approved foundation systems and permanently anchored to those foundations. Manufactured homes are really just the same thing. We define them as the same under our municipal code. So our municipal code permits modular homes in all zoning districts where single family housing is permitted, but it doesn't make any reference to manufactured homes. I believe our housing consultant for the housing element recommended that we include a reference to both modular and manufactured homes. And those have to be a use by right in all residential zones. And again, we can't target them for specific regulation. To the extent they're going to be regulated, they're going to be regulated like all other residential uses. Next, we have transitional and supportive housing. So transitional housing means rental housing provided to facilitate the movement of homeless individuals or families to conventional housing. Transitional housing may take the form of a single family or multifamily units and may include supportive services operated under program requirements to allow individuals or families to gain necessary life skills in support of independent living. This type of housing may be occupied by a program recipient for a minimum of 6 months up to a maximum of 2 years, at which time it may be recirculated to another eligible program recipient. So that's transitional housing. On the other hand, supportive housing means housing with no limit on the length of stay that is occupied by the target population, so the homeless individuals oftentimes, that is linked to on-site or off-site services that assist the supportive housing resident in retaining the housing, improving his or her health status, and maximizing his or her ability to live and, when possible, work in the community. Just something to note, transitional housing really focuses on homeless individuals and is for a limited term. Supportive housing, it's not for a limited term, and it's broader than just homeless individuals, but it includes homeless individuals as well. Question.
Is there a limit to the number of people that can reside in either one of those housing units?
I believe there is. I don't have that number here, but I can provide that after this.
That's fine. I just want to know how big they would be.
I believe there is, yeah.
Okay.
So under our municipal code, all zoning districts except the multiple family residential high density zone and the hillside management zone permit transitional and supportive housing. Under state law, transitional and supportive housing must be used by right in all residential zones. And again, we can't single them out for regulation. To the extent we're going to regulate them, we have to regulate them like all other residential uses.
So I know that in some of these state laws that we've been handed recently, that there are carve-outs for the high hazard zones.
Yeah.
Those apply in transitional or supportive housing.
They don't. There are no such carve-outs for the laws we're mentioning today.
That makes that question about how many people are allowed in there even more important.
Yeah, I'll look into that after this presentation. Supportive housing. So, like I said, we drew a distinction between transitional and supportive housing. In addition, there's another line in the government code that says that supportive housing must not only be a use by right, must not only be treated like a residential use, but must be a use by right. So transitional housing can undergo design review. Supportive housing cannot, because the use by right. It won't go through discretionary review. And that's only the case for in zones where it's multifamily or mixed use. So not in a single family zone. And lastly, we have emergency shelters. An emergency shelter means any building used by a nonprofit organization to provide emergency housing and meals on a temporary basis, 6 months or less, to stranded, evicted, transient, or otherwise dislocated and homeless persons until a satisfactory solution to their immediate problem is found. Under our current municipal code, the parking standards for emergency shelters are based on the size of the structure. Under state law, the parking standards must be based on the number of staff at the emergency shelter. In addition, the parking requirement cannot exceed the total number of parking spaces required for other residential or commercial uses within the same zone. So if the calculation that's based on the number of staff members yields a higher parking requirement than would otherwise be required under our code, the lower parking requirement applies. And that is all.
I have one question on emergency shelters.
Yes.
I'm used to those being put in place in response to a declaration, but I got the sense from your presentation that the concept of emergency is a little more fluid here. That the idea is that if a community thinks that there are a certain number of people that need housing, that they can establish an emergency shelter without the declaration by the municipality. Am I correct in reading that?
Yes, you don't need, for an emergency shelter, you don't need the declaration by the municipality. In fact, and maybe staff can help me on this one. In fact, I think the housing element needs to zone for emergency shelters. In certain areas, they need to be provided as needs to be a use by right. Am I correct in assuming that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
See, the emergency plan for the city of Sierra Madre lists a couple of locations like the park house or down by the rec center or the monastery area as shelters, which could be activated in the event of a citywide emergency. But this is looking like somebody decides to set up an emergency shelter, but it's not something that is
In response to an emergency.
part of a municipal action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think this is, although I can't confirm this because I haven't looked at Pasadena's municipal code to confirm, but I think, for example, there's a shelter for homeless individuals on Raymond. It's an adult shelter. And I think Union Station Homeless Services. I think that qualifies as an emergency shelter because those folks are there. They keep people there, but they keep people there. People upstairs are there for less than 6 months, I know. And once in a while, they allow people to sleep within the cafeteria area after they've fed people and they've cleaned up. So I believe that constitutes an emergency shelter, and that's just an ongoing, program they have over there. It's not in response to a specific emergency per se.
Mr. City Attorney, it sounds like SB 2 kind of said that all of this has to happen to allow supportive housing and transitional housing. But in order to be supportive housing, it sounds like AB 2162 really had a laundry list of requirements in order to be by right. So we're not really saying that we're going to we're not going to allow supportive housing by right. We're saying that if you qualify as all 6 of that criteria in AB 2162, that you will be allowed to do it by right.
Correct. And that's correct. And the reason the state's doing that is because a lot of cities have proposed supportive housing projects and the residents have killed them. And the residents have killed them through CEQA lawsuits. And now there is no CEQA process because this isn't there are no discretionary permits being issued anymore. Since it's a use by right, it's a ministerial act. And so residents can't stop it anymore. Assuming they meet the criteria.
If you qualify for those 6,
right?
Like a 55-year affordability restriction, everything has to be lower income households, 25% of them must be restricted to supportive housing. So there's quite a threshold to be by right on the supportive housing, but no such threshold for the transitional housing.
Right, but the transitional housing doesn't have that same advantage to the applicant because transitional housing, if proposed in a residential single family area, would need to go to design review. So, and there could be CEQA implications there. So transitional housing, assuming it meets those 6 criteria that you outlined, it has to be approved by right and has that advantage that the other type of housing doesn't.
And it has to be included in non-residential zones that permit multifamily use. So is that basically our entire downtown corridor?
Yeah, and it's not necessary.
Sorry.
No, sorry, finish your question.
Where it's zoned as a commercial, but commercial allows for multifamily?
I don't think I read that it can be a residential area so long as it's zoned residential multifamily.
Yes, I was asking the opposite question. I was asking if our commercial zone would be subject to the supportive housing by right because of the fact that because we allow multifamily in the commercial zone.
Yes. Other questions? If not, I'll end the sharing here, and I will try looking up to see how many individuals can live in a transitional or supportive housing facility.
I can buy you 3 minutes, Mr. City Attorney.
Great.
If you would be so kind as to share the slide. Thank you. I'll flip to the other. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this specific item on the agenda. Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda with regards to this specific item are available on the city's website, as is the agenda packet. State legislation, Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the commission's ability to take action on specific requests. Doesn't apply here. We will confine the discussions on this public comment period solely to this particular agenda item. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this particular item. Simply dial the phone number as listed, enter the meeting ID and the password. When you've dialed in, *9 or raise your hand.
So far, you still do not have any callers on the line.
All right, I'm gonna give them the rest of their 3 minutes to dial in here. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this particular agenda item. We welcome your attendance and participation. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. If you would like to make comments, you have 20 seconds to complete your dial-in to the phone number listed on the screen. Enter the meeting ID, the password if prompted. If you're dialing in, *9, or if you're logging in from your computer, raise your hand. At this time, we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Does anybody have any comments?
Yeah, I have a few questions and comments, some of which I shared with staff earlier. But mostly I'm fine with all the changes, but I think that when we list these various uses in the different zones, we don't say the number. And so typically, we say the number of dwelling units that's allowed, and there's some math that goes along with how many of those are in multifamily, or on single family, it's just one. But here we just say modular manufactured homes, transitional and supportive housing. So we need to figure out a metric on how many of these people can build, either per lot or other, that works with state law. The other issue is that the different uses we're talking about, transitional and supportive housing, family daycare homes, are sort of actually different kind of uses, but modular homes are really just houses. It's just a different way of building them. And so to me, it seems like this would be better to say, have a definition of modular homes, and then in the definition of dwelling unit, say a modular home is a type of dwelling unit. Because otherwise we're going to have to comb through our code and figure out the right, everywhere where it says dwelling unit, and also add modular home, as if it's some sort of separate beast. For instance, in the parking, we have so many parking spaces per dwelling unit, but we don't have a parking standard for modular homes.
Yeah.
Right? So we either need to go through and put in the number of modular homes you can have, and we need to clear that if you have a dwelling unit, you can't have a modular home. Like if you're on an R1 lot, you get one house, right? And it could be modular or not modular, but you can't have a modular home and a stick-built house. At least I don't think we want to do that. And I don't think we're required to do that by state law.
Would that also mean that an ADU couldn't be modular? Or we just don't get to regulate ADUs at all? And
Well, the definition of modular home that we put in is more like a single family house. I'm assuming that definition comes from state law. And we're pretty much required to use it, and we can't monkey with it. But I don't see why, if somebody wanted to build an ADU out of a modular unit, that anything would prevent them either.
Well, especially if we were to define it the way that you're talking about as a dwelling unit.
So I'll note that under the existing
Seems
code,
to me that,
I apologize. Commissioner Dallas.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I was going to say under the existing code, it says the definition for dwelling, single family includes modular homes, but it only talks about modular homes. I think what Commissioner Hutt is suggesting, that I think that makes sense. We can amend that definition to include our revised definition of modular homes and manufactured homes. Or, I mean, we could just leave in manufactured homes in there and say manufactured homes means modular homes or something.
Well, if there's a state definition, would it make more sense to say as defined by the state, so that when it changes next year, we don't have to update anything?
My preferred practice is that we define it and then we also link back to the state law, because it's always difficult to refer to external documents when we're working through our municipal code, unless it's like, for example, that huge requirement for supportive housing. In that case, we don't want to put all that language in the municipal code, but to the extent we can, I think we should, and we should reference the state law as well.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I think the thing is if you read the definition of modular home that is proposed here, it works. You understand what it means. I mean, you might not know what the Construction and Safety Standards Act of 1974 says about the particular details, but you get the general concept. Whereas if we just referred to that, then you wouldn't really know what it means at all. And so I think this is a good way to go. And I understand that the housing consultant really wants us to have a separate definition of modular home. So I'm fine with that. I just think we should then, in the definition of single family or in dwelling, if we want to make it all dwellings, just say, a dwelling includes or a modular unit, or you could say a modular home is a type of dwelling unit. And we can do that in the definition of both, so it's cross-referenced and it's really clear whichever way you look.
Yeah, staff can make that edit.
So I like the idea of adding manufactured to add to the definition of a dwelling unit. So a dwelling unit is modular or manufactured or just a custom built, whatever. And then, yeah, the state definition gets tagged to whatever the modular is. So we're just referring to it in ours.
We can reference both.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that would be good. The other comment I had, and I shared this with staff, was that because we're saying family daycare home is now up to 14, we don't distinguish like we used to between family daycare home small and family daycare home large. So we could just delete those definitions. I don't think we need them at all anymore. One other issue that looking at these issues with single family, multifamily, family daycare, is that we don't have a definition of family. We deleted it a while ago because we had some issues, but we included a definition of housekeeping unit. But housekeeping unit is not used anywhere in the code. So we should just add a definition of family. And I thought we did this before. Let's say family means housekeeping unit. And then it ties together. Because we had some issues about who can qualify as a family and whatnot. And so we came up with this definition of housekeeping unit, which means a single integrated home style of living together in shared space in a non-exclusive, non-compartmentalized lifestyle with one kitchen, one set of utilities, and one mailing address, and one front door for all purposes residing in the location, right? So that's your generic-y family that's not necessarily a nuclear family, which is great and inclusive, but it's not used anywhere. So we just need to add somewhere family equals housekeeping unit. And then all of our other code references and definitions that say single family, one family living will actually work.
Commissioner Halt, what was your first comment? I'm sorry. I agree with everything you said so far. It's just that first one I missed.
With regard to the,
It was, I think it was in regard before the, did you say something before the modular homes?
well, I was just saying that we need to define the number of these, of each one of these uses. And so I think we fixed the modular home issue by just making it a dwelling unit, because that's already taken care of throughout the code. And then when we add in the various places supportive, let's see, family daycare homes, what are the other ones? Transitional and supportive housing. Yeah, and emergency. I guess emergency one is sort of taken care of on its own, but transitional and supportive housing and family daycare homes, we have to have some limit to the number of those. And I assume that that's one per lot, but maybe that's not true on the multifamily. Can you have one per unit?
So we can regulate it as we would regulate other residential uses. So yeah, I guess you could in a multifamily, you could have it in, you could have multiple units operating as family daycare units. But on a single lot in a single family zone, we could limit it to one. Can you point me to where in the municipal code it says that you have one home per lot? We should use that language wherever that is.
Well, I mean, if you just look at, say on what is it, page 39 of the staff packet in R1, section 1720.020A, one family dwellings of a permanent character, not more than one per lot, except for second units, blah, 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 blah. So, but the question is, can you have a family daycare home and a house? Or, so maybe we just say, you know, one family daycare unit per dwelling unit, and you know, because if under state law you can have one in each unit, and you've got an apartment building, well, I guess you could have as many units as you have, but you can't have whatever number of units, whether it's one on a single family or two on a duplex lot, and then also add a family daycare home and a supportive housing.
Yeah, and we can mirror the language in the section you cited. So 1720.020A, we can take that language and apply it to the.
Well, I think it'd be easier if we just said everywhere we have it, just say one per dwelling unit. Because that, I mean, I think, because we already have all this stuff built up for dwelling units, so that sort of fixes that.
So you're saying you'd rather have it say that instead of not more than one per lot?
Well, yeah, because then you have to say, but if you have a dwelling unit, you can't have it. Or in the dwelling unit part, you have to say, but if you have a family daycare home, you can't have a dwelling unit, right? Because it's really one, you get to choose between all of these.
But I guess they could have, but we would have to have that same exception that 1720.020A has, which says except for second units in compliance with chapter 1722. So they could, right, I guess, have an ADU that's a dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Then with that exception, then yeah, I think we can have that language inserted.
So I kind of read this as being the conversion of a regular dwelling unit, a regular house, into either supportive housing or being used as childcare or whatever. So we're not, it's not in addition to, it's a conversion of a existing, but you're saying that it could be an addition to?
The child daycare facility is a home. That person that's taking care of those kids lives in that home.
Right. And it was a
Uh,
home before. They didn't add anything to they didn't put another structure on the property to make it what it is, to use it as a childcare or transitional housing. They took the existing structure and changed what we would consider its normal use.
Right. That's correct.
Right, and Bob, that's exactly what I was trying to get at. Maybe I wasn't very clear. That if we say one of those per dwelling unit, then it's clear that it's part of that thing. It's not in addition to the dwelling unit, and it's also when you start looking at the height limits, the setbacks, the FAR, all that stuff. It's not like this is a different beast that doesn't exist within those, and you max out your size of your house, and then you get to build a family daycare home on top of it. It's part of the same thing. It's really more about use of that dwelling unit.
Then I think we should spell that out specifically, because I can see people changing the structure in order to take advantage of, well, I needed more room for the 14 kids that I'm taking care of and things like that.
And if they did that and it required a permit, they would need to come before the city to get that permit, which it likely would.
Yeah, and or they're making so much money on supportive or transitional housing that they're going to add an extra bedroom because they've already got 3 people in a bedroom now, and they could put another 2 bedrooms. Not that we've seen this on any street in town, but suddenly people want to build a building with 5 bedrooms, and it's like, really? And so somehow I think we should at least spell that out, so it's not, the opportunity is not quite so enticing.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I mean, it's per dwelling unit, and each dwelling unit then is governed by the other zoning codes and everything.
Well,
So,
suppose you get a house like on Sunnyside, and you wanted to remodel it and add a couple more bedrooms where where there used to be a garage or something. So the idea is the advantage of the extra bedrooms is I guess and I'm not the lawyer, so as I read this is that they could assume that by right they have the ability to do this because the state law allows them to create this opportunity to provide housing. On the other hand, they're taking what was a regular residence and they're adding to it for profit.
my understanding is that it's governed by the codes, regardless. Is that the misunderstanding?
No, it is governed by the code, where their development is limited to whatever the development standards are under our code. I think what Commissioner Spears is saying is that someone now under the existing law might be incentivized to, I guess, seek those permits and make those alterations, modifications to their property, right, to add in more bedrooms, because we can't control that use, although we can control the development standards.
That's right. So somebody might have a dozen kids and want to do the same thing. I mean, who are we to judge? And
Yeah.
actually, I saw a facility like that once used for mental health patients. That was rather high end and very nice. And so they're not all just sketchy little places. And so,
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm here. I'm just having Zoom problems again, so I'm on voice. But and I missed some of the beginning discussion. But I guess, Bob, are you talking about maybe using the ADU process to circumvent the problem, and then and linking it to this kind of use?
Well, generally what I'm looking at is that people will use their property to make money in such a way that will impact the neighbors and the community, and while I understand the state's desire to provide additional supportive housing and childcare, and I get all that, what I'm concerned about is that people use the state's encouragement by this laws to expand their property and to thereby impact. So if you have a 3-bedroom house and you're using it to support enough people that only 3 bedrooms work, I have no problem with that. But when they convert the garage or they try to add on and, you know, enclose the back porch or whatever because they can put a couple more beds in there, that's when things become a little sketchy to me.
I think we may have to deal with that in the conditions of approval of a discretionary permit, maybe.
Okay.
Well, I think just to clarify Bob's point, if there's a certain envelope that you can build to now as a single family home, whether you do it because you have 12 kids or because you've got the supportive center or anything, as long as you stay within that envelope that we have, then I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure somebody can't max out their single family house and then add on above our FAR setback and all those rules we have to make sure we don't have impact on the neighbors. But if they use that extra bedroom because they have a lot of kids or because of supportive care, either way, I'm fine with that.
And Chair Dennison, I'm still looking, but I found that the supportive housing project that is approved by right, the one that avoids CEQA and the discretion, that needs to be, that's at 50 units. So that's a big project. So that really wouldn't apply to the single family context.
Okay, I guess, let me ask you this. Because we no longer have the ability to regulate ADUs, are we, and this might have been what Commissioner Hutt was working towards, are we going to structure the code such that somebody can't max out the square footage of their single family home, add an ADU, and now it's a separate dwelling unit and double the amount of kids that can be there?
I don't think we can control that. I mean, if they've maxed out the size of their home and they can also fit an ADU on the property and meet the ADU setback requirements, then that's just something they can do.
So because an ADU is defined as a separate dwelling unit and the code from the state says dwelling units, then anybody who puts an ADU in there can then have, 28 residents or 28 kids for a daycare rather than 14?
I haven't looked at the state licensing requirements, but I imagine that there's some kind of minimum square footage in order to have these kids at the property. Because I don't think you can put like another 10, 7, 14 kids in a small ADU. I would think, I don't know. I haven't looked at that, but I imagine there's some kind of limitation like that on square footage.
Well, you bring up an interesting question of licensure. Do we require proof of licensure before any of this happens?
So all this activity is licensed, but by the state, not by us. And we don't have the ability to license them. When I did some research on this, I found that there are 2 large family daycare homes that operate in the city of Sierra Madre. There are no small daycare homes that operate in the city of Sierra Madre. And I got that information from the state. We don't have that information because they don't apply for business licenses like other businesses do. So the city itself doesn't know how many are operating in the city. We'd have to contact the state for that.
So then if somebody does have an ADU and they put 28 kids for daycare instead of 14 kids for daycare, it becomes an enforcement issue where the city has to check with the state as to whether or not there's licensure, and then if not, start a proceeding? Is that what I'm hearing?
So we would start a proceeding. Obviously, all the other standards under our municipal code apply, right? So if we're starting a proceeding, there would have to be a reason, like perhaps it's a nuisance or something. So if it was a nuisance, the city doesn't need to check with the state. If it's a nuisance, we're going to treat it like we would any other home. You're causing a nuisance, and we're going to send you the notice. And if you don't respond to the notice, we're going to send you another one, and then you're going to get, before the planning commission. So if it's a nuisance issue, or if it's like some kind of, I don't know, if they're violating some other provision of the code, we'll prosecute them like we would any other house.
Okay.
I think the key word is licensed daycare facility. If they're unlicensed, we won't know about it until something happens.
Yeah, if they're unlicensed, that situation, I think both the state and the city would have the ability to regulate that, because, I mean, we're only preempted because the state says we're preempted when they grant the license.
But with regard to the unlicensed, I mean, that's the same thing as people breaking any rule. Like if they just built a house without permits, we do code enforcement, right?
Right.
But in this case, we'd refer to them to the county and the state agency that licenses daycare centers. Would we have the authority to tell them to stop operating until they did that?
Yes, we would, definitely.
For the other commissioners, I reached out to staff because one of my questions was, how will the city know how many and where these locations are and who's involved? Because we could have transitional housing for people who are impaired in some way, or we could have a number of small children who in the middle of an emergency suddenly show up at the city's door because, they don't have an emergency plan, but we don't have the authority to ask for that or to regulate that.
All right. Are there any other questions, comments for staff or city attorney?
I'm just curious why the care facilities don't need a business license. It seems like they're a business.
They are a business. I guess I was doing a little bit of research on that question too. It seems like to me, I don't have a conclusive answer here. It seems like to me their margins are so low that they don't want the city imposing additional costs, and so that's why they don't require a license. That's why they don't require discretionary approvals, because it's not that cities are opposed to these things. Generally, cities allow for them. The issue is that they're not economical. They're not a very high profit margin business.
If they are a money-making business, Sierra Madre has a sales tax. Do they have to pay sales tax?
You only pay a sales tax on the purchase of goods, but not on services. And this would be a service.
Okay, but if they sold something in that would be something else. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just not buying the low margin argument. I mean, there are a lot of businesses here in town that are low margin.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for them, for or against them. I'm just noting that in the legislative history, they kind of were suggesting that this isn't, people are discouraged from starting these businesses because the costs are so high.
Yeah, it seems like it would be better to lower the cost of the permit for that business, but still require permits so the town knows where they are. It just seems like a health safety issue for everybody. And so,
Yes.
Well, I can tell you, Peggy, some cities incentivize doctors to settle in their towns, and they don't charge a business license fee at all.
really?
Yeah, I was in Dunbar. I don't know if it still holds, but they never required a license fee. I don't even know if I can't remember if I had to even register. I don't think so. But when I changed cities, I did, because they sent me a notice. So,
Interesting.
And I don't know how, in terms of profitability and all that kind of stuff. I think they just wanted to encourage certain types of businesses in their town too. So I guess they can do what they feel like.
And on that point, Commissioner Pevsner's staff explored that option. We explored requiring registration but not charging them, just so we know how many are operating in the city. And as we dug into it, the legislator expressly says there's field preemption here, which means the city can't even touch it. The entire field is preempted. So we can't impose any regulations that aren't expressly authorized under state law. And the only regulation that's authorized under state law is us applying those regulations that we would to any other single family home or residential use. So we can't target them specifically, in short.
All right. Any other questions or comments for city attorney or staff? All right, I think that we had a fair number of changes. So is this something, Director Gonzalez, that you want to bring back before us with those changes, or you feel you have clear guidance on what changes need to be recommended?
I think we have clear guidance, and we'll coordinate that effort with the city attorney to make sure we capture everything.
So then I guess we're looking for a motion to approve this resolution with the recommended edits.
Yes.
I'll move approval with the edits that were noted, and with also the direction that like staff to email it out to the planning commission for when it comes to the city council, so we can take another pass and send along any follow-up comments we might have.
We will do that.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let me find my agenda. All right, next up is Planning Commission reports. Do any planning commissioners have anything to report? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the Planning and Community Preservation staff reports. Director Gonzalez.
So I was assuming that the amendments that we just reviewed were going to be coming back for our next meeting on April 15th, but I might move up another item that we're going to be looking at possibly. Otherwise, we will end up canceling the next meeting unless we have other items on the agenda that we could put on.
Okay, speaking of other items, I know that we had prepared a list of items that were near and dear to everybody's heart to work on. And I believe there was going to be a prioritization process with either the council liaison or the council itself, or some kind of prioritization on what it was that we should be focusing on for this year. Have we had any results for that, from that?
So I shared the information for those who responded, shared it with the city manager, he shared it with council, and we are good to move forward with those amendments. We will be bringing those to the Planning Commission. I wanted to get through this particular amendment first because it's tied with the timeline with the housing element. So I made that a priority, but we will be bringing those other amendments forward in addition to amending the ADU ordinance.
All right, and do we have a sense of timing of when we would possibly be seeing anything from Madre de la Rosa?
So I would imagine we're looking at still in early summer before we have a document release, maybe a little sooner, for a draft EIR and draft specific plan to be placed on the city webpage for public comment. It's going to be a 60-day public comment period.
And then after the public comment period, then it comes before Planning Commission?
It'll come before the Planning Commission and then moves on to the City Council.
Okay. Those will probably be pretty short meetings.
Director Gonzalez, did we share the that slide about the process for the Madre de la Rosa?
That is on the webpage.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
If individuals on the commission or members of the public would like to view it, we just put together, so it's just one slide, but I think it's helpful and it's pretty short, and it tracks a timeline, like which bodies have to review it. It's not tied to any specific date, but it shows you the process of who has to review it, what's being reviewed, what needs to be approved, and it's sequential.
Or can we include just, one sentence in that link in the agenda going forward, just as an information? I know there's a ton of informational sections, probably some by government code and some others, but if we can put that onto our agendas so that when people have questions, we can just easily refer them, that would probably be great.
We will do that.
I think that we will get more and more questions as we approach.
And also the city council on April 13th will be considering the AT&T cell tower conditional use permit. And the planning commission made a recommendation to approve that to the city council at their last meeting.
Chair Dennison, if you'd like, I can share my screen if you want to see that slide I was talking about.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, sharing now. This is on the city's page. We're currently negotiating the development agreement with the applicant.
So then after the 60-day period, it looks like that 60-day period of the EIR being publicly available is that first box, the first blue box, is that correct? And then from there, if there's any changes that need to be made, staff will make them, prepare the report, and then it'll go to Planning Commission, or after a quick 20-minute discussion, we'll go to City Council. Okay, great, that's very helpful.
Would you like me to stop sharing?
Yeah, I think you can. Thank you. Maybe we can put together a bit.ly, similar to the way that we have one for joining the public session, so that it's easier for people to type in.
Okay. That concludes my report.
Any other questions for Director Gonzalez? Hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting till our next regularly scheduled, perhaps meeting of April 15th. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.